The Earth, 66 million years ago. We're in the final moments of the Cretaceous period, the twilight of an age ruled by giants. This is a world both ancient and astonishingly alive. Vast inland seas have receded, giving rise to lush coastal plains, crisscrossed by meandering rivers and cloaked in dense forests of conifers, ferns, and the first flowering plants. This vibrant landscape, which would one day become Western North America, was the stage for the final act in the dinosaurs' long reign. Here, in what paleontologists call the Hell Creek Formation, evolution had sculpted some of its most spectacular and iconic creations. Herds of duck-billed Edmontosaurus browsed in the lowlands, while the triple-horned Triceratops clashed for dominance. Above it all loomed the undisputed apex predator, Tyrannosaurus rex. It was a world of breathtaking scale, a complex and dangerous ecosystem where life was a constant struggle for survival. In this high-stakes environment, every creature needed an edge, a strategy to endure. And for one remarkable herbivore, the strategy was to become an impenetrable fortress. From the deep shadows of the cypress swamps and fern-choked undergrowth, a new form emerges. It moves not with the speed of a predator or the grace of a gazelle, but with the slow, inexorable confidence of something that has no need to run. This is Ankylosaurus magniventris, the fused lizard with a great belly. It is one of the largest and last of the armored dinosaurs. Spanning up to 30 feet in length and weighing an estimated 6 to 8 tons, it was built less like an animal and more like a living citadel. Its body is a testament to the power of defense. Low to the ground, impossibly broad, and covered from head to tail in a mosaic of bone, it was the culmination of over 100 million years of ankylosaurian evolution. Each deliberate step it takes on its stout, pillar-like legs speaks of immense power held in reserve. In a world defined by the predator-prey arms race, Ankylosaurus represented the ultimate defensive strategy: to become a target too difficult, too costly, and too dangerous to attack. The armor of Ankylosaurus was its defining feature, a biological masterpiece of fortification. It was not a single turtle-like shell, but a complex, integrated system of bony plates known as osteoderms, which grew directly within its skin. These ranged from large, flat scutes and ridged plates that covered its neck, back, and hips to a carpet of smaller, pebble-like ossicles that filled every dap, providing flexible yet near impenetrable protection. This dermal armor created a formidable shield that could deflect the bone-crushing bites of the largest carnivores. Even its head was a bastion of bone. Its skull was incredibly thick, with bony plates fused over its surface, and 2 sets of horns jutting from the back. In a truly unique adaptation, Ankylosaurus even evolved bony shutters that could slide down to protect its eyes. This was defense in absolute detail. Its low, wide posture made it incredibly stable, an armored mountain that would be almost impossible for a predator to overturn and expose its softer, unarmored underbelly. It was, in every sense, a living fortress. While its body was a shield, its tail was a sword, or more accurately, a warhammer. At the end of its powerful, muscular tail was the Ankylosaurus's most iconic feature, a massive, formidable club. This was no simple lump of bone. The club was an intricate structure formed from several large osteoderms fused together and anchored to the last few vertebrae of the tail, which were themselves interlocked and stiffened with ossified tendons to form a rigid handle. This design allowed the entire tail to swing as a single devastating unit. The power for this weapon came from enormous muscles anchored to its wide, heavily built hips. Biomechanical studies suggest that a swing from an adult Ankylosaurus could generate enough force to shatter the leg bones of a Tyrannosaurus. This was not a passive deterrent. It was an active, bone-breaking weapon that could cripple or even kill an attacker. An Ankylosaurus, when threatened, could hunker down, present its armored back, and swing its tail with lethal precision, transforming a seemingly passive herbivore into a highly dangerous combatant. Behind the formidable armor and weaponry was a quiet, unassuming herbivore. The life of an Ankylosaurus was not one of constant battle, but of methodical foraging. Its primary occupation was eating. Its broad, shovel-like beak was perfectly suited for cropping low-growing vegetation, such as ferns, cycads, and shrubs. Its teeth were small, weak, and leaf-shaped, wholly inadequate for extensive chewing. This suggests that Ankylosaurus was a bulk feeder. It would strip large quantities of plant matter and swallow it with minimal processing, relying on a vast and complex digestive system to break down the tough fibers. Its famously large belly, the magniventris in its name, housed a huge fermentation gut, where microbes would do the hard work of extracting nutrients. Furthermore, its skull contained incredibly convoluted and looping nasal passages. While this may have helped with thermoregulation, it also indicates an exceptionally keen sense of smell, vital for locating patches of nutritious plants or detecting the scent of a predator long before it came into view. Its daily routine was a slow, deliberate quest for fuel to power its immense armored body. Ankylosaurus did not live in isolation. It was a citizen of one of the most dynamic and dangerous ecosystems in Earth's history. It ambled through forests patrolled by the most fearsome predator to ever walk the land, Tyrannosaurus rex. An encounter between these two late Cretaceous titans would have been a masterclass in tension and strategy. A full-grown T-Rex, with its powerful legs and devastating bite, could kill almost any other animal in its environment. But the Ankylosaurus presented a unique challenge. A direct assault was nearly impossible. Its low profile protected its vulnerable legs, and its armor could withstand the predator's bite. The Tyrannosaurus's only hope would be to flip the 8-ton beast over, a feat of immense difficulty and risk. All the while, the Ankylosaurus would not be idle. It would pivot, keeping its armor toward the threat, its tail club held at the ready. For the T-Rex, the calculation was brutal. A single well-aimed blow from that tail could inflict a crippling injury, a broken ankle, or shattered metatarsal. In the unforgiving world of the Cretaceous, a lame predator was a dead predator. More often than not, wisdom would prevail over hunger, and the king of the dinosaurs would leave the living fortress to its peaceful grazing. This creature, this masterpiece of natural engineering, represents a final, defiant statement in the 160-million-year epic of the dinosaurs. Ankylosaurus was a survivor. It thrived in the shadow of giants, a testament to the evolutionary principle that defense can be as potent a strategy as offense. It was one of the very last non-avian dinosaurs, walking the plains of North America right up until the final cataclysm. When the asteroid struck, ending the Cretaceous period and wiping out 3/4 of all life on Earth, the Ankylosaurus perished alongside its contemporaries, the Tyrannosaurus and the Triceratops. Its reign as the ultimate armored dinosaur came to an abrupt and final end. Today, its legacy is written in stone. The fossils we unearth from the Badlands of the Hell Creek Formation are echoes from a lost world. Each piece of fossilized armor, each vertebra of its clubbed tail, tells the story of this incredible animal. It was the last and greatest of its kind, a walking citadel that stood as a symbol of endurance at the very close of an era. The story of Ankylosaurus is not just the story of a single dinosaur. It is the story of survival perfected, the final, impenetrable chapter in the age of reptiles. To understand the majesty of Ankylosaurus, we must first journey back in time, long before its reign, to an earlier, greener Earth. The story of this living fortress does not begin with a roar, but with a quiet, evolutionary whisper in the early Jurassic. Here, among the first great dinosaur dynasties, a new defensive strategy was emerging. This was the dawn of the Thyreophora, the shield-bearers, a group of ornithischian or bird-hipped dinosaurs who began to trade speed for security. They were pioneers in the art of natural armor. One of the earliest and most well-understood of these trailblazers was Ankylosaurus. Walking on four legs, it was a relatively unassuming creature, but across its back, from neck to tail, ran parallel rows of bony studs or scutes. This was not the impenetrable shell of its descendants, but a foundational blueprint. It was a simple yet revolutionary declaration that to survive in a world of predators, it was better not to run, but to stand and endure. This was the humble beginning of a biological arms race that would span over 100 million years. From this common, armored ancestry, a great evolutionary divergence occurred. The Thyreophoran family tree split into two mighty branches, each taking the concept of defense in a radically different direction. One branch gave rise to the Stegosauria, dinosaurs that would become famous for the towering plates on their backs and the lethal spikes on their tails. Theirs was a strategy of active, weaponized defense and, perhaps, dynamic visual display. But our story follows the other branch, the Ankylosauria. This lineage committed fully to the idea of passive defense. It was an evolutionary wager that the ultimate survival tool was to become an impenetrable citadel of bone. While their stegosaur cousins grew tall and ostentatious, the early ankylosaurs grew wider, lower to the ground, their bodies gradually becoming encased in an ever more complex shield. It was a fundamental choice in the grand theater of evolution, the agile swordsman versus the impregnable fortress. For the next 100 million years, this choice would drive the ankylosaurs toward an incredible destiny, one of ever-increasing armor and resilience. The first great dynasty to emerge from this ankylosaurian commitment was the Nodosauridae. Flourishing from the late Jurassic through to the end of the Cretaceous, these were the original masters of heavy armor. Their bodies were covered in a dense mosaic of osteoderms, often forming a solid, shield-like carapace over the hips. The name Nodosaurus itself means knobbed lizard, a fitting description for their bumpy, rugged appearance. But many nodosaurids took this a step further, evolving arrays of menacing spikes and spines. A prime example is the magnificent Sauropelta. This early Cretaceous giant boasted enormous, sharp spines erupting from its shoulder region, creating a formidable wall of spikes to deter any predator. Yet, for all their defensive prowess, the nodosaurids universally lacked one key feature: a tail club. Their strategy was entirely passive. They were living barricades, designed to withstand an attack, not to deliver one. They relied on their impenetrable hide and sharp spines to make any assault simply not worth the effort for a hungry carnivore. While the nodosaurids perfected the art of the passive shield, a parallel lineage, the Ankylosauridae, was developing a revolutionary new concept. They shared the same foundation of head-to-tail armor, the same low-slung, tank-like body plan. But they were on the cusp of evolving one of the most sophisticated weapons in the animal kingdom. They added a crucial, game-changing innovation: the tail club. This was no simple bludgeon. It was a complex biological structure. The last several vertebrae of the tail became fused and rigid, creating a stiff, inflexible handle. At the end of this handle, several large osteoderms fused together, swelling into a massive, heavy knob of solid bone. Fossils of early ankylosaurids from Asia, such as Gobisaurus, show this feature in its developmental stages, a stiffened tail ending in a moderately enlarged club. This singular evolution marked a profound shift in defensive strategy. An ankylosaurid was no longer just a target to be broken, it was an adversary that could deliver a bone-shattering counterattack. The fortress now had a cannon. But what exactly was this incredible armor? The secret lies in bony structures called osteoderms. Unlike the internal skeleton, osteoderms are bones that form within the dermis, the deep layer of the skin. It is the same biological process that creates the scutes on a crocodile's back or the shell of an armadillo. In Ankylosaurus, these osteoderms achieved an unparalleled level of diversity and complexity. They came in all shapes and sizes, from small, pebble-like ossicles that filled the gaps between larger plates, creating a kind of flexible chainmail, to massive, flat scutes that formed the main shield, and even hollow, blade-like spikes. This bony mosaic was not exposed. In life, it would have been covered by a tough layer of keratin, the same protein in our own fingernails. The astounding discovery of the mummified Boreopelta specimen has given us an unprecedented view of this anatomy, preserving the exact arrangement of the armor, the texture of the overlying scales, and even hints of reddish-brown camouflage. This reveals that the armor was not just a dead shell, but a living, growing, and integral part of the animal's biology. Generations of refinement led to the zenith of the ankylosaurid design, long before its most famous member appeared. In the late Cretaceous of North America, about 76 million years ago, lived a creature that was the perfect embodiment of the living fortress, Euoplocephalus. Its name, meaning well-armored head, is an understatement. The skull was a solid block of fused bone, wider than it was long, with horns at its back corners and even its eyelids armored with bony plates, known as palpebral ossicles. This was a head that could be used as a battering ram. Its body was a testament to defensive engineering. Bands of large keeled scutes ran across its broad back, while its hips were encased in a fused, rigid pelvic shield. All this weight was supported by stout, pillar-like legs, and at its rear, the ankylosaurid weapon was perfected. A massive, symmetrical, bone-shattering tail club. Euoplocephalus was the complete package. It represented the full realization of the ankylosaurid blueprint, an integrated, cohesive defensive system where every part, from its bony eyelids to its weaponized tail, worked in concert. It was a masterpiece of evolution. And so, the journey reached its final chapters. It was a saga stretching over 100 million years, an evolutionary epic written in the language of bone. From the simple, studded hides of the earliest thyreophorans, the path had split. The nodosaurids had become masters of static defense, living citadels bristling with spikes and shields, proving the immense value of a passive strategy. But the ankylosaurids had taken a different route. They had not only perfected the shield, but had forged a sword, or rather, a hammer. They had transformed their tails into active, devastating weapons, turning defense into a powerful and intimidating offense. Every species we have seen, from the ancestral Scelidorsus through the spiked Sauropelta to the perfectly engineered Euoplocephalus, was a crucial step in this process. Each one was a field test, a refinement of the design, a building block in the anatomical legacy. They built the foundation, layer by layer, preparing the world for the arrival of the ultimate armored dinosaur. The stage was now set, at the very end of the age of dinosaurs, for the ascension of the largest and most powerful of them all, the great Ankylosaurus. To understand the Ankylosaurus is to study a fortress made of flesh and bone. This was not a creature built for speed or agility. It was an animal engineered for a single, overriding purpose: survival through impenetrability. Its very name, meaning fused lizard, hints at the radical anatomical adaptations that defined it. The body plan was low and broad, an immense living shield hugging the late Cretaceous landscape. Standing no taller than a modern rhinoceros, but weighing upwards of 6 tons, its center of gravity was exceptionally low, making it almost impossible to tip over. Every aspect of its external anatomy, from the tip of its snout to the end of its tail, was a component of an integrated defensive system. This was not merely a dinosaur with armor, this was a dinosaur that was armor. Its silhouette alone was a declaration of defiance against the apex predators of its time. Before we can appreciate how it wielded its famous weapon, we must first deconstruct the magnificent living citadel that was its body. It is a masterpiece of evolutionary bioengineering, a testament to the principle that sometimes the greatest offense is an unbreachable defense. The secret to this impenetrability lay not in a single shell, but in a complex, multi-layered mosaic of bone embedded directly into its skin. These were osteoderms, a feature seen today in crocodiles and armadillos, but perfected by the ankylosaurs to an unparalleled degree. They varied dramatically in size and shape across the body. Large, flat plates or scutes formed broad shields over the back and hips, arranged in transverse bands that allowed for some limited flexibility. Interspersed between these larger plates were countless smaller ossicles, bony nodules that filled every gap, ensuring no patch of vulnerable skin was left exposed. This created a suit of armor that was both incredibly strong and resilient. It wasn't a rigid, monolithic carapace. It was more like a form of biological chainmail, capable of absorbing and dissipating the force of a predator's attack. Fossilized skin impressions confirm this intricate arrangement, showing a pebbled, heavily protected hide that would have been nightmarishly difficult for even the sharpest tyrannosaur tooth to pierce. This dermal armor was the Ankylosaurus's first and most formidable line of defense. Nowhere was this fusion of bone and skin more extreme than in the skull. The head of an Ankylosaurus was a solid, triangular box of bone. The skull bones themselves were fused together, obliterating the sutures seen in most other animals. Overlying this solid cranium were additional layers of fused osteoderms, creating a helmet of incredible thickness and strength. Even the eyelids were not left vulnerable. Unique bony plates known as palpebral ossicles rested within the eyelid tissue, allowing the dinosaur to effectively shutter its eyes behind shields of bone. Peering from this armored fortress were two relatively small eyes, suggesting that sight was not its primary sense. Instead, its defense was proactive. Within the heavily built snout were remarkably complex and convoluted nasal passages. Air would loop and spiral through these chambers before reaching the lungs. Paleontologists theorize these passages could have been used for multiple purposes: to warm and humidify inhaled air, to act as a resonating chamber for powerful, low-frequency vocalizations, or even to help radiate excess body heat. The Ankylosaurus's head was a multifunction tool: a defensive helmet, a communications device, and a radiator, all in one. But this external armor was only half the story. To support such immense weight and provide a rigid foundation for its defensive strategy, the internal skeleton of Ankylosaurus was equally specialized. Its rib cage was exceptionally broad and deep, forming a massive barrel-shaped torso. The ribs themselves were fused to the vertebrae, creating a rigid thoracic cage that would not buckle under the weight of a predator. The most remarkable adaptation, however, was in the hips. A vast number of vertebrae, from the lower back, the sacrum, and even the base of the tail, were fused with the hip bones to form a single, solid structure called a synsacrum. This pelvic shield was a massive sheet of bone that provided a completely immobile anchor point for the powerful hind leg muscles and the base of the tail. This rigidity was key. It meant that when an Ankylosaurus foot its ground, its body was essentially a single, unified block. It couldn't be easily twisted or manipulated. This skeletal architecture provided the unyielding platform upon which the armor was mounted and from which its devastating tail could be swung with maximum force. A fortress of this magnitude required a specialized engine. The Ankylosaurus was a dedicated herbivore, a low-level browser designed to process immense quantities of tough, fibrous plant material. Its broad, square snout, tipped with a beak, was not suited for selective plucking, but for indiscriminate, wide-mouthed cropping of ferns, cycads, and low-growing flowering plants. Its teeth were small, leaf-shaped, and relatively weak, indicating that it did little chewing. Instead, it likely swallowed vegetation whole, relying on a vast and complex digestive system to do the work. The enormous barrel-shaped rib cage housed an expansive gut, where a cocktail of symbiotic microbes would have fermented the tough plant matter over a long period. This slow, deliberate digestive process meant the Ankylosaurus was likely a slow, deliberate creature in all its movements. It was not built for pursuit or evasion. Its metabolism was geared for endurance and the patient conversion of low-quality forage into the energy needed to carry several tons of bone armor. Its life was a slow patrol of its territory, constantly fueling the furnace that powered the living tank. While the body was a shield, the tail was a sword, or more accurately, a warhammer. The tail club of Ankylosaurus is one of the most iconic and formidable weapons in the history of life on Earth. It was not simply a lump of bone at the end of its tail. It was a highly sophisticated composite structure. The posterior half of the tail was transformed into a stiff, rigid handle. The vertebrae in this section possessed overlapping, interlocking bony projections, or zygopophyses, which locked them together, preventing any side-to-side flexibility. This transformed the tail's end into a rigid rod, allowing the force generated by the massive hip muscles to be transferred directly to the club without being dampened. The club itself, the knob, was composed of several large osteoderms fused together and to the final tail vertebrae. This created a single, massive ball of solid bone, often weighing over 50 kilograms. The entire structure was a perfect marriage of anatomy and physics. A powerful motor in the hips, a rigid, force-transferring handle, and a devastatingly heavy point of impact. The power of this weapon cannot be overstated. Biomechanical models, based on the well-preserved fossil skeletons, have calculated the potential force of a swing. An adult Ankylosaurus could swing its tail with enough velocity and momentum to generate thousands of pounds of force upon impact. This was more than enough to crush bone. Fossil evidence supports this conclusion. Paleontologists have discovered skeletons of large predators like Tyrannosaurus rex with healed injuries consistent with a powerful, localized, blunt force trauma event. A well-aimed blow from an Ankylosaurus club to the leg of an attacking Tyrannosaur could shatter the metatarsals or tibia, crippling the predator and ending the fight immediately. This weapon turned the Ankylosaurus from a passive, defensive animal into a dangerous combatant. It was the ultimate deterrent. Any predator attempting to attack this living fortress had to contend not only with impenetrable armor, but also with a devastating counterattack. The Ankylosaurus was the culmination of a long evolutionary arms race, a perfectly designed living tank, demonstrating that in the brutal world of the Cretaceous, survival often belonged not to the swift, but to the unshakable. The name Ankylosaurus conjures an image of impenetrable defense, a walking fortress plated in bone and armed with a devastating club. We see a creature built for conflict, an icon of Cretaceous resilience. But behind this shield of osteoderms and spikes lay an animal with fundamental needs. What fueled this 30-foot, 6-ton behemoth? What kind of engine ran quietly inside this armored chassis? The answer, paradoxically, points not to a fierce predator, but to a placid, deliberate herbivore. Unlocking the diet of Ankylosaurus is to understand the very foundation of its existence. It's a journey that takes us past the intimidating armor and deep into the subtle architecture of its skull, the vast cavern of its gut, and the lost world of foliage it called home. How did a creature so exquisitely designed for defense sustain itself? The clues are not found in tooth and claw marks on a victim, but in the silent, fossilized evidence of a lifetime spent grazing through the final days of the dinosaurs. This is the story of a Cretaceous appetite, the slow-burning fire that powered the ultimate dinosaurian tank. Our investigation begins with the head, the very tool for food acquisition. The skull of Ankylosaurus is a masterpiece of fortification, wider than it is long, with armor plates fused directly to the bone. Even its eyelids were bony shutters. But for all its defensive modifications, its primary purpose was still to eat. At the front of its broad snout was not a mouth full of fearsome teeth, but a wide, toothless beak, covered in life with a tough layer of keratin called a rhamphtheca. This was not a tool for cracking bone or delivering a powerful bite. It was a cropping instrument, designed to shear through swaths of low-lying vegetation with efficiency. Behind this beak, set deep in its powerful jaws, were its teeth. And they are surprisingly small, delicate, and leaf-shaped. Unlike the vast grinding batteries of its contemporaries like Triceratops or Edmontosaurus, the teeth of Ankylosaurus show very little wear. They were suited for little more than puncturing and shredding soft plant matter, offering the first crucial clue: this giant wasn't processing tough, woody material in its mouth. The simple, peg-like teeth tell only part of the story. The structure of the jaw itself reveals the mechanics of how Ankylosaurus ate. Reconstructions of its jaw musculature suggest a surprisingly weak bite force for an animal of its size. The joint allowed for a simple vertical chopping motion, with almost no capacity for the side-to-side grinding that is essential for pulverizing tough plant fibers. The food was likely sliced by the beak and then mashed briefly before being swallowed largely intact. But the skull holds another secret, an incredibly complex and convoluted set of nasal passages, passages that looped and twisted within the snout. While this may have aided in warming inhaled air or enhancing its sense of smell to find specific food sources, it also meant that Ankylosaurus could continue breathing steadily even while its mouth was full of vegetation. This anatomy paints a picture of a continuous, deliberate feeder, a creature that methodically cropped and swallowed, letting a different part of its body do the hard work of digestion. The mouth was simply the gateway to a much larger, more impressive internal system. If the mouth wasn't designed for extensive processing, the burden of digestion had to fall elsewhere. The answer lies in the sheer scale of the animal's torso. Ankylosaurus was incredibly wide, with a vast barrel-shaped rib cage that enclosed an enormous abdominal cavity. This was not just for support, it was a biological necessity. This space housed a colossal digestive tract, a complex fermentation factory essential for its survival. Inside this gut, a thriving ecosystem of symbiotic microbes would have worked tirelessly, breaking down the tough cellulose in the plant matter that the animal's own enzymes could not. This process, known as hindgut fermentation, is seen in many modern herbivores like horses and rhinos, but the scale within Ankylosaurus was likely unprecedented. Food would remain in this slow-moving system for days, allowing the microbes maximum time to extract every last calorie. It was an inefficient but effective strategy. To fuel its massive body and grow its elaborate armor, Ankylosaurus didn't need high-quality food. It needed a constant, massive quantity of low-quality forage to keep its internal furnace burning. To truly understand what Ankylosaurus ate, we must resurrect the world it inhabited. Let us travel back 68 million years to the Hell Creek Formation of North America. This was not a world of grassy plains. Grass had not yet evolved to dominate landscapes. Instead, Ankylosaurus roamed through a world that was both alien and familiar. The canopy was dominated by conifers like redwoods and araucaria, while the understory was a lush, thick carpet of ferns, cycads, and horsetails. This was the Cretaceous salad bar. It was also a world in transition, witnessing the rise of flowering plants, or angiosperms. Small shrub-like flowering plants would have added variety and vital nutrients to the available browse. With its head held low to the ground, Ankylosaurus was perfectly positioned to be a low-level specialist. Its wide beak could clear huge patches of ferns and ground cover in a single pass. It was an indiscriminate bulk feeder, consuming a mixture of everything within its reach: ferns, young cycads, and perhaps the occasional fallen fruit from the newly evolved angiosperms. It was a landscaper of the Cretaceous floor. Anatomy and environment provide a powerful framework, but paleontologists are always searching for the smoking gun, direct evidence of a prehistoric meal. For some dinosaurs, this comes in the form of gastroliths, or stomach stones, swallowed to help grind food in a muscular gizzard. While plausible for Ankylosaurus, no definitive gastroliths have ever been found in direct association with a skeleton. The most definitive evidence would be fossilized stomach contents, but such finds are astronomically rare. So, we turn to other lines of evidence. Paleobotanists analyze fossilized pollen and leaf impressions preserved in the very same rock layers as the dinosaurs. These microscopic and macroscopic fossils create a detailed catalog of the available plant life, confirming the abundance of ferns and other soft vegetation. Furthermore, discoveries of coprolites or fossilized dung from other large herbivores in the same formations have contained chewed-up fragments of conifer and cycad wood, proving these plants were on the menu. While no coprolite has been definitively assigned to Ankylosaurus, this combined evidence allows us to build a robust, data-driven picture of its diet, moving from speculation to scientific inference. All the evidence converges on a single, compelling portrait. We have an animal with a wide, cropping beak, not a selective plucking instrument. We have small, weak teeth and a simple jaw motion incapable of thorough chewing. We have an enormous, barrel-shaped body designed to house a massive fermentation vat for a gut. And we have a prehistoric environment rich in low-growing ferns, cycads, and early flowering plants. Ankylosaurus was not a nimble, choosy browser. It was a living lawnmower, a slow-moving, low-energy processor of the Cretaceous undergrowth. Its strategy was one of bulk over quality. It consumed vast quantities of vegetation, relying on its immense digestive system and microbial partners to do the hard work of extracting nutrients. This diet perfectly complements its defensive strategy. Heavy armor and a life of constant grazing demand a low-energy lifestyle. It was a creature built to endure, to outlast threats, and to quietly and efficiently convert the boundless greenery of its world into the bone and sinew of an impregnable fortress. It was, in essence, a mountain of an animal, sustained by a world of ferns. To truly understand Ankylosaurus, we must first journey back to its world, not a world of barren rock and fossilized bone, but a living, breathing landscape. We arrive in the latest stage of the Cretaceous period, approximately 67 million years ago, in a region we now call the Hell Creek Formation of North America. This was no desolate wasteland. It was a vast, humid, subtropical coastal plain crisscrossed by winding rivers and dotted with swamps and floodplains. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying vegetation, and the blossoms of the first flowering plants. Towering conifers, ferns, and ginkgos formed a dense canopy, while a lush undergrowth of cycads and palms carpeted the forest floor. This was a world of giants, a greenhouse planet teeming with life. And it was here, amidst this primeval splendor, that the living fortress, Ankylosaurus, carved out its existence. It was a player in one of the most dynamic and famous ecosystems in Earth's history, a world on the very cusp of a dramatic and final change. Its story is not one of isolation, but of interaction within this complex and often perilous neighborhood. Ankylosaurus was far from the only plant eater in this verdant world. The landscape was dominated by enormous herds of other herbivores, each a marvel of evolution. Among the most common were the hadrosaurs, the so-called duck-billed dinosaurs. Chief among them was Edmontorosaurus, a colossal creature that could reach lengths of over 40 feet. They moved in great herds, their calls echoing through the forests, as they used their complex dental batteries, hundreds of tightly packed teeth, to grind tough vegetation. Sharing these feeding grounds was another icon of the Cretaceous, Triceratops. These three-horned titans, with their massive bony frills, were walking citadels in their own right. They were social animals, likely living in family groups, using their formidable horns for defense against predators and for display and dominance contests within the herd. For Ankylosaurus, these vast congregations of herbivores were a constant presence. They were not competitors for the low-lying ferns and shrubs Ankylosaurus preferred, but their sheer numbers shaped the environment, creating pathways through the dense forests and signaling the constant looming threat of the great predators that followed them. While the colossal herbivores dominated the view, the world of Ankylosaurus was rich with smaller, often overlooked inhabitants. The forest floor, a world of shadow and damp leaf litter, was a kingdom unto itself. Here, smaller dinosaurs like Thescelosaurus, a bipedal plant-eater about the size of a large dog, scurried through the ferns. Nimble and quick, they would have darted away at the thunderous approach of their larger neighbors. In the clearings, ostrich-like ornithomimids, such as Struthiomimus, moved with incredible speed, snapping up insects, small lizards, and plants with their toothless beaks. And beneath the feet of all of them, a new dynasty was quietly beginning its rise. Small shrew-like mammals, such as Purgatorius, lived a life in the shadows, scurrying through the undergrowth and tree roots primarily at night. To a creature as immense as Ankylosaurus, these smaller animals were little more than fleeting movements in its peripheral vision, yet they were integral threads in the ecosystem's complex tapestry. They were the cleanup crews, the seed dispersers, and the prey for a host of smaller predators, all contributing to the health of this vibrant world. Life in Hell Creek was not confined to the ground. The skies were patrolled by some of the largest flying creatures of all time. Soaring on thermals high above the canopy was the awe-inspiring Quetzalcoatlus. This was not a dinosaur, but a pterosaur, a flying reptile of unimaginable scale. With a wingspan rivaling that of a small airplane, over 33 feet from tip to tip, its shadow passing over the ground would have been a momentous event. Standing on the ground, it was as tall as a giraffe, stalking through wetlands on its long limbs, using its enormous toothless beak to pluck fish, small dinosaurs, and other unfortunate animals from the ground and water. For a fully grown, heavily armored Ankylosaurus, a Quetzalcoatlus likely posed little threat. However, for a young, vulnerable Ankylosaurus, the sight of that colossal shape descending from the sky would have been terrifying. These aerial giants were a reminder that danger in the Cretaceous could come from any direction, and that constant vigilance, even for a walking fortress, was a necessity for survival in this dynamic and three-dimensional world. The many rivers and swamps of the Hell Creek Formation were ecosystems in their own right, teeming with life that Ankylosaurus would have frequently encountered. As our armored herbivore came to the water's edge to drink, it would have entered a different domain, one ruled by powerful semi-aquatic predators. The waters were home to Borealosuchus, a prehistoric crocodilian that, while not as large as its earlier ancestors like Deinosuchus, was still a formidable ambush hunter. It would lie in wait, almost completely submerged, indistinguishable from a floating log, ready to snap at any unwary creature that ventured too close. The rivers were also filled with turtles, whose armored shells mirrored Ankylosaurus's own defensive strategy on a smaller scale, and a variety of fish, including ancient gars and sturgeons, whose lineages survive to this day. For Ankylosaurus, the water's edge was a place of both necessity and danger. It needed to drink, but in doing so, it exposed its less armored underbelly and face to the hidden threats lurking just beneath the surface. It was another calculated risk in the daily struggle for survival in a world where every environment held its own unique perils. Of all the neighbors Ankylosaurus had, one stood above all others in the hierarchy of terror. It was the undisputed apex predator of Hell Creek, a name that still inspires awe and fear: Tyrannosaurus rex. This was a hunter of immense proportions, over 40 feet long and weighing up to 9 tons. Its powerful legs could carry it across the landscape with surprising speed, and its massive skull, filled with 60 banana-sized serrated teeth, was a bone-shattering weapon. But T-Rex was not just brute force. Fossil evidence reveals it had some of the most advanced senses in the animal kingdom. Its large olfactory bulbs gave it a phenomenal sense of smell, allowing it to track prey from miles away. Its forward-facing eyes provided excellent binocular vision, granting it the depth perception crucial for a predator judging a strike. Its hearing was attuned to low-frequency sounds, perhaps the footfalls of other giant dinosaurs. When this super predator fixed its gaze upon an Ankylosaurus, it was the ultimate evolutionary showdown, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. The T-Rex's intelligence, power, and senses were pitted against the Ankylosaurus's impenetrable armor and devastating tail club. The world of Ankylosaurus was a complex, interconnected web of life and death, a perfectly balanced ecosystem honed by millions of years of evolution. It was a place of breathtaking scale, where herds of Edmontosaurus, numbering in the thousands, migrated across vast plains, stalked by the most fearsome carnivore to ever walk the earth. It was a world where giant pterosaurs ruled the skies, where armored crocodiles haunted the waterways, and where tiny mammals scurried in the shadows of giants, awaiting their turn. In this world, Ankylosaurus was not merely a passive, armored rock. It was an active participant. It was a landscape shaper, clearing low-lying vegetation. It was a formidable defender, capable of standing its ground against the ultimate predator, a testament to the power of defensive evolution. The interactions between all these creatures, the predator and prey, the grazer and the scavenger, the giant and the small, created a dynamic equilibrium. This was the peak of the age of dinosaurs, a rich and complete world that had thrived for over 150 million years. Ankylosaurus was one of its final and most spectacular creations, a living fortress perfectly adapted to its time and its place, a neighborhood of wonders and terrors. The world of the Late Cretaceous, 68 million years ago, was a paradise of breathtaking beauty and unrelenting peril. In the lush, humid floodplains of what would become the Hell Creek Formation of North America, life flourished in a constant, delicate balance. Towering conifers and broadleaf trees formed a dense canopy, filtering the sunlight onto a vibrant undergrowth of ferns, cycads, and early flowering plants. This was the domain of the Ankylosaurus, a solitary herbivore built not for speed but for endurance. Every moment of its life was an exercise in vigilance. While it browsed on low-lying vegetation, its small, weak teeth perfectly suited for stripping leaves, its senses were perpetually on high alert. The snap of a twig, a change in the wind's direction, the distant tremor of heavy footfalls, all were signals of potential danger. For in this verdant world, the Ankylosaurus was not a hunter, but the hunted. Its existence was defined by a single, overwhelming evolutionary pressure, the presence of the most terrifying land predator the planet has ever known. Its entire anatomy, a marvel of biological engineering, was a direct response to this threat. It was a living fortress, a walking castle of bone and keratin, forged in the crucible of an arms race that had spanned millions of years. And this is the threat that shaped it: Tyrannosaurus rex. The tyrant lizard king was more than a predator. It was the ecosystem's governing force. Standing nearly 13 feet tall at the hips and stretching over 40 feet from snout to tail, its sheer scale was intimidating. But its lethality came from its sophisticated design. Binocular vision, among the sharpest of any animal, allowed it to judge distances with deadly precision. Its olfactory bulbs were enormous, granting it a sense of smell so acute it could likely track prey for miles. And then there was the bite. Its 60 massive, serrated teeth were not just for slicing flesh, but for shattering bone. Powered by immense jaw muscles, it could deliver a bite force exceeding 12,000 pounds per square inch, the strongest of any terrestrial animal. This was not a creature that merely killed, it pulverized. Tyrannosaurus was an engine of destruction, a predator perfectly equipped to tackle the largest and most challenging prey the Cretaceous had to offer. Any herbivore, no matter how large or well protected, was a potential target on its relentless patrol of its territory. Its shadow falling across the landscape silenced the world beneath it, heralding a moment of judgment. The inevitable encounter is a study in contrasts. The Tyrannosaurus, a creature of motion and aggression, spots the slow-moving Ankylosaurus in a clearing. The predator's approach is not a reckless charge, but a calculated assessment. Its advanced brain weighs the variables: the size of the Ankylosaurus, its own hunger levels, the energy that will be expended in the attack, and the significant risk of injury. The potential reward is immense, nearly 5 tons of nutrient-rich meat encased in a shell, but the cost could be fatal. The Ankylosaurus, for its part, does not run. It cannot. Instead, it relies on a strategy perfected over generations. Sensing the predator's presence, it ceases all movement, plants its short, sturdy legs wide, and hunkers down. It lowers its head, protecting its unarmored throat, and presents its attacker with an almost featureless, impregnable dome of armor. It becomes a living boulder, a static defensive position designed to frustrate and outlast the aggressor. The air crackles with tension. The hunter analyzes, circling its quarry, searching for a flaw in the fortress. The hunted waits, conserving its energy, its entire being focused on the singular purpose of survival. The Tyrannosaurus's first challenge is the armor itself. This is no simple hide. The Ankylosaurus's back and sides are covered in osteoderms, plates of bone embedded directly into the skin, which are then covered in a layer of tough keratin. These are not loosely attached scales. They are an integrated, interlocking shield. The larger plates, or scutes, create a broad defensive surface, while clusters of smaller bony nodules, called ossicles, fill in the gaps, leaving virtually no exposed flesh. This biological chainmail is light enough to allow movement, but strong enough to withstand incredible forces. A direct bite from a T-Rex, which could shear through the bones of other dinosaurs, would likely slide off the convex, hardened plates of the Ankylosaurus. Fossil evidence supports this defensive capability. Healed fractures on the armor of related species suggest they survived encounters with large predators. The armor acts as the ultimate deterrent, a passive defense so effective that it often persuades a predator that the effort and risk are simply not worth the potential meal. It is a clear physical statement: I am not easy prey. Attacking me will have consequences. But the master predator is patient and intelligent. The Tyrannosaurus knows that no fortress is perfect. The Ankylosaurus's incredible dorsal shield hides a critical vulnerability: its underbelly. Devoid of osteoderms, the skin there is soft and unprotected. housing vital organs. The entire conflict boils down to a single objective for the predator: flip the 10,000-pound herbivore onto its back. This is a monumental task. The Ankylosaurus's low center of gravity and wide stance make it incredibly stable. A Tyrannosaurus cannot simply use its small arms. Instead, it must employ its most powerful tools: its massive head and colossal legs. It would attempt to get alongside the Ankylosaurus using its snout and the side of its jaw as a battering ram, shoving with all its might. It's a contest of physics and raw power. The T-Rex leverages its height and mass, driving its leg muscles to generate immense force, trying to push the Ankylosaurus off balance. The Ankylosaurus resists, digging its feet into the earth, becoming an anchor of flesh and bone. The ground trembles as these two titans engage in a primal struggle of force against stability, a life-or-death battle of brute strength. As the Tyrannosaurus commits to this high-energy attack, it exposes itself to the Ankylosaurus's devastating secret weapon. This is no longer a passive defense. This is active, targeted retaliation. At the end of its tail, the Ankylosaurus wields a massive, bony club. This structure is an anatomical marvel. The last third of the tail's vertebrae are fused together, forming a stiff, inflexible handle. At the very end, two enormous osteoderms are fused to these vertebrae, creating a solid, heavy knob of bone that could weigh over 100 pounds. Powerful muscles anchored at the hip allowed the Ankylosaurus to swing this club with surprising speed and terrifying force. Biomechanical studies have calculated that a strike from this tail could generate enough energy to shatter solid bone. This was not a blunt instrument for show. It was a precision weapon. The Ankylosaurus would aim low, targeting the most vulnerable parts of the T-Rex, the ankles and metatarsals. These bones, while strong, were not designed to withstand a direct, high-velocity impact from a biological sledgehammer. The tail club transformed the Ankylosaurus from a passive victim into a dangerous combatant. The outcome of this epic clash was never certain. It was a deadly gamble for the Tyrannosaurus. While a successful flip could mean a life-sustaining meal, a moment of miscalculation could be catastrophic. A single, well-placed blow from the tail club to its leg would result in a compound fracture. For a bipedal predator weighing over 8 tons, a shattered ankle or leg was an inescapable death sentence. Unable to hunt, it would starve. Unable to flee, it would fall prey to scavengers or other carnivores. The fossil record remains tantalizingly ambiguous, showing us T-Rex bones with healed injuries that may have come from such encounters, but a crippling blow would leave no such evidence of survival. More often than not, an experienced Tyrannosaurus, faced with a healthy adult Ankylosaurus, would likely decide the risk outweighed the reward. After a tense standoff and a few failed attempts to find an opening, the great predator would disengage, seeking easier, less dangerous prey. The Ankylosaurus would remain a testament to the power of defense. It was not the biggest, the fastest, or the fiercest dinosaur of its time, but through its unparalleled armor and its bone-crushing secret weapon, it was one of the ultimate survivors. Every fossil is a story, a fragment of a life captured in the slow, silent language of stone. For Ankylosaurus, that story began to be told in 1906 in the rugged badlands of Montana's Hell Creek Formation. Here, the legendary fossil hunter Barnum Brown, a man whose name is synonymous with the golden age of American paleontology, unearthed the first scientifically recognized remains of this armored titan. What he found was not a complete skeleton, but tantalizing pieces: the top of a skull, vertebrae, ribs, and a collection of thick, bony plates known as osteoderms. From these fragments, a new creature was christened, Ankylosaurus magniventris, the fused lizard with a great belly. It was a fitting name, but this initial discovery provided only a ghost of an outline. It hinted at a creature of immense defensive capability, but the full, breathtaking scope of its biological engineering remained locked in the earth, a puzzle waiting for future generations to piece together. The first chapter was written, but the true nature of the living fortress was still a profound mystery. Barnum Brown's discovery was the cornerstone, but the architectural marvel that is Ankylosaurus was built over a century of subsequent finds. Each new fossil, often unearthed by chance, added a crucial detail to the emerging blueprint. Scapula, femurs, and more sections of the iconic armor plating filled in the creature's immense torso. But the most spectacular revelations were yet to come. In the deserts of Alberta, Canada, and across the American West, paleontologists began to find the weapon that would define the species. Immense, interlocking vertebrae at the end of the tail, ossified tendons running like steel cables along its length, and finally, the club itself, a massive fused knot of bone, dense and devastating. This was no passive defense. This was an active, dynamic weapon system. The image of Ankylosaurus transformed from a slow, lumbering reptile protected by simple armor into a biological war machine, a walking citadel armed with a wrecking ball. Our understanding of the creature was being forged, much like its own bony armor, piece by painstaking piece, from the scattered legacy it left in stone. Sometimes, the greatest insights into one animal come from the discovery of a relative. In 2011, a mining operation in Alberta, Canada, accidentally unearthed one of the most significant paleontological finds of the 21st century. Not an Ankylosaurus, but a close cousin, a notosaurid now named Borealopelta markmitchellii. It was more than a skeleton, it was a dinosaur mummy. Fossilized with its skin, armor plates in their life position, and even the ghostly remnants of its last meal. The level of preservation was so extraordinary that scientists could study its external appearance in unprecedented detail. They could see the texture of its scales and the sheath of keratin that once covered its spikes. Most remarkably, chemical analysis of preserved organic compounds revealed its coloration, a reddish-brown on its back, fading to a lighter tone on its underside. This pattern, known as countershading, is a form of camouflage. The discovery shattered the image of all ankylosaurians as uniformly gray or brown. It suggested that even this 20-foot, 3,000-pound armored beast may have relied on stealth, hiding from the great predators of its age. It was a stunning revelation that reshaped our entire vision of how these animals lived and looked. The tail club remains the most iconic and debated feature of Ankylosaurus. For years, its purpose was assumed to be defensive, but it wasn't until the advent of advanced computer modeling that we could truly grasp its terrifying potential. The tail was not simply a heavy object on a flexible spine. The final third of the tail was a rigid, fused rod of vertebrae, creating a stiff, unbending handle. This handle, powered by enormous muscles anchored to the wide hips, could swing the massive club with incredible precision and speed. Biomechanical studies, treating the tail like a complex piece of engineering, have calculated the impact force. The results are staggering. A direct hit could generate enough energy to shatter bone, capable of breaking the leg of an adult Tyrannosaurus rex. While it may have also served a role in social displays or ritual combat between individuals, its primary function as a devastatingly effective weapon seems undeniable. It was the ultimate deterrent, a clear and unambiguous message to any predator foolish enough to challenge the living fortress: stay back. While the external armor speaks of brute force, the skull of Ankylosaurus reveals a hidden world of surprising complexity. For decades, the solid, fused nature of the skull made studying its internal structures impossible. But with modern CT scanning technology, we can now digitally peel back the layers of bone and venture inside. What we found is astonishing. The nasal passages are not simple direct tubes. Instead, they are an incredibly long and convoluted labyrinth, folding and twisting back on themselves before reaching the throat. This intricate structure would have given Ankylosaurus an enormous surface area for olfactory sensors, granting it a superb sense of smell, essential for finding specific plants or detecting predators from a great distance. These passages may have also acted as a resonating chamber, allowing it to produce deep, low-frequency sounds for communication that could travel for miles. Or they may have functioned as a heat exchanger, cooling the blood before it reached its small, precious brain. This internal intricacy stands in stark contrast to its brutish exterior, revealing a creature with a sensitive and complex sensory life. For all that we have learned, the legacy of stone is incomplete. Ankylosaurus still holds its deepest secrets close, guarding them across an abyss of 66 million years. Many fundamental questions remain unanswered. What exactly did it eat? We know it was a herbivore, but its small, weak teeth and wide beak suggest a specialized diet we have yet to identify. Was it a solitary animal, wandering its territory alone? Or did it move in small, armored herds for collective security? The fossil record is silent. We find no trackways of multiple individuals traveling together, no bone beds suggesting a mass death event. Perhaps the most profound mystery is that of its beginning. We have no confirmed Ankylosaurus eggs, no nests, and no fossils of its young. The first chapter of its life, from hatchling to juvenile, is a complete blank. How did this immense creature start its life? How did it protect its unarmored young? Without this evidence, a huge part of the Ankylosaurus story remains untold, a puzzle with the most crucial pieces still missing, waiting to be discovered. From Barnum Brown's first dusty fragments to the digital scans of today, our journey to understand Ankylosaurus mirrors the creature itself, slow, deliberate, and built upon a foundation of immense strength. Each fossil is a word, each skeleton a sentence in an epic story of evolution. It represents a pinnacle of defensive design, an organism that became a fortress, so perfectly adapted to its world that it seemed invincible. But no fortress can withstand the wrath of the cosmos. 66 million years ago, a rock fell from the sky, and the world caught fire. The very ecosystems that Ankylosaurus depended upon were annihilated in a geological instant. Its armor, its club, its sheer biological power were no defense against global extinction. The great fused lizard's reign was over. Its final legacy was not one of survival, but of stone, a silent, magnificent testament to a life of resilience, an armored marvel whose story we are still learning to read, one fossil at a time.